Here's something most people never hear. Alzheimer's disease doesn't begin on the day someone forgets a loved one's face. It begins 10, even 20 years earlier, quietly and without symptoms, while you still feel completely fine. And here's the part that genuinely changes things. 2 decades of brain research have settled one question for good. Your brain can be trained at any age. That isn't a motivational slogan. It's plain physiology. So at the end of this video, I'm going to walk you through 7 simple exercises. Do all of them cleanly on your first try, and your brain is in great shape. Fumble through a few of them, and that's not bad news. It's simply your brain telling you it could use a little training. And those same 7 exercises are exactly how you give it that training. Stay with me, because first, I want to show you what's actually happening inside your head. When you understand why this works, the exercises stop being a novelty and start being a strategy. Do them consistently, and that's when they begin to pay off every single week. Before we begin, if you want clear, honest health information, please press like and subscribe. It helps more people find this channel. We're working toward 300,000 subscribers, and the QR code is on your screen right now. So let's talk about what's really going on. As the years add up, thinking gets a little harder for everyone. There are no exceptions here. It doesn't matter how mentally active you've been your whole life. For some people, the change stays small. Misplaced keys, mixing up the grandkids' names. For others, it turns into something serious, a real drop in quality of life, leaning more and more on the people around them, and in some cases, it even shortens life. Underneath all of it sits one specific chemical process, and understanding it is the first real step toward doing something meaningful about it. And here is the part that often catches people off guard. This isn't a disease that simply arrives one morning. It builds up over decades, layered into the background of an ordinary life. The same daily habits that feel harmless in the moment can quietly stack up year after year until something that was supposed to be safe begins to fray. That's why this conversation matters long before any of us actually feels a symptom. By the time a symptom shows itself, the deck has usually been stacked against you for a long time. Here's how that process starts. When you're under constant stress, when you're short on sleep night after night, when there's lingering inflammation simmering quietly in the body, your cells start producing more of something called free radicals. A free radical is simply an unstable molecule that is missing an electron. Because it is missing one, it goes hunting through the body. It reaches into healthy cells and damages them from the inside, trying to grab the electron it lacks. Your neurons, the cells that make up your brain, are especially exposed to this. The brain is an energy hog. Even though it makes up only a small fraction of your body weight, it burns through roughly 20% of all the oxygen you take in. High oxygen use means a lot of chemical reactions running hot, and a lot of hot reactions means a lot of chances for something to go wrong. Researchers give a name to this buildup of free radicals over time. They call it oxidative stress, and the evidence points to oxidative stress as one of the central drivers behind Alzheimer's disease. The thing that makes oxidative stress so hard to detect and so easy to underestimate is that it does its work without raising its voice. There is no warning light on the dashboard, no pain in the chest, no tightness in the head. The damage accumulates at the level of single molecules, inside single cells, in places where no symptom could ever reach. You go about your day, you sleep, you eat, you work, and underneath all of it, the chemistry has been quietly tilting in the wrong direction. By the time you notice anything at all, the imbalance has usually been running for years, possibly more than a decade. Here's where the damage happens. Inside every neuron sit tiny structures called mitochondria. Think of them as the little power plants that make energy for the cell. Free radicals damage those power plants from the inside out. When the power plants start failing, the neuron basically starves, and slowly, quietly, it begins to die. This is the key thing to understand. All of this is happening long before anyone notices a single symptom. You can feel completely normal while the breakdown has already been going on for years. So when the tiredness shows up, when the brain fog rolls in, when you walk into a room and forget why you came in, that is not the start of this process. That is the middle of it. The earlier chapters have already been written without your knowledge. One reason this matters so much is that the brain doesn't replace its neurons the way most other tissues in the body do. Cells in your skin, your liver, your gut lining, they're constantly being turned over. The brain is far stingier. Some populations of neurons are essentially with you for life. That makes protecting the ones you have a genuinely important strategy, and it makes losing them a loss you cannot simply recover from later. Now, here's where a lot of people make their first move, and where it quietly goes wrong. They start taking vitamin C or vitamin E, hoping those will mop up the free radicals. For the body as a whole, that is not a bad instinct at all. But for the brain specifically, most people feel no difference at all. There's a real reason for that, and it's worth understanding. Between your bloodstream and your brain sits a kind of security checkpoint called the blood-brain barrier. It is a filtering system, and its whole job is to keep toxins, germs, and most foreign substances out of your brain. You absolutely want that barrier. It protects you. But it doesn't make exceptions for the good stuff either. It blocks most antioxidants too. Antioxidants are the compounds that neutralize free radicals. So your vitamins do their work in the blood. They help the rest of your body, and then they hit that checkpoint, and most of them simply don't make it through. The brain is left without much antioxidant backup, which is part of why so many memory-focused supplements end up underwhelming the people who take them faithfully. There is also a quiet emotional cost to that misplaced hope. When someone reaches for a supplement, they're often doing it because they want to feel like they are taking action. They are not being lazy, they are being human. So when months go by and the memory still feels the same, it is easy to slide into the conclusion that nothing will help. That is the wrong lesson, and it deserves to be named clearly. The supplements were not useless. The strategy was not aimed at the right part of the problem. Clinicians hear a version of this constantly. Take someone like James. He reads up on his own health, and he's been taking vitamin C and vitamin E faithfully for years because he heard they push back against aging. For his general health, those may well be doing something useful. But when he tells his doctor he hasn't noticed a single bit of difference in his memory or his focus, he isn't imagining it. The antioxidants in those pills are doing their job in his bloodstream. They just can't cross that checkpoint and reach the brain tissue where he was hoping they'd help. It isn't that the vitamins are useless, it's that the brain plays by stricter rules. That detail matters more than people realize, because it changes the way you shop for solutions in the future. That's exactly why scientists have been hunting for compounds that can actually get past that barrier. The search isn't about finding another vitamin. It's about finding compounds whose chemistry is friendly to the barrier, compounds that look enough like the brain's own messaging molecules to be waved through, or that can piggyback on transport systems the brain already trusts. One of the compounds drawing serious attention is rosmarinic acid. It is a natural plant compound, a polyphenol found in rosemary, sage, mint, and a handful of other herbs. Research suggests it may help take the edge off anxiety and give a modest lift to how energetic people feel throughout the day. What makes it genuinely interesting to scientists is that it appears able to slip across the blood-brain barrier and do its anti-inflammatory, antioxidant work right there inside the nervous tissue where it's needed most. That is an entirely different promise than what's sitting in the average multivitamin bottle. Another compound under study is superoxide dismutase, often shortened to SOD. That is an enzyme your body actually makes on its own, and it is one of the most powerful natural antioxidants there is. A version of it that comes from melon extract has drawn interest because it appears to work right inside the cell, in the exact spot where most of the oxidative damage is happening. The principle is straightforward. If the most common free radical in the body is the superoxide radical, then the body's own first-line defense against it deserves a closer look, and that defense is SOD. And then there are flavonoids, yet another family of plant compounds, which seem to boost the effect of the first two and support the nervous system more broadly. Flavonoids are found in everyday foods most of us already eat: berries, tea, citrus, dark leafy greens, but the research here is ongoing, and dosing matters more than headlines suggest. These are all areas worth keeping an eye on as the research continues to develop, and worth asking your doctor about rather than reaching for on your own. But here's the catch with all of them. Antioxidants only protect what you already have. They put the brakes on the damage. They slow the breakdown. They don't build anything new. And if you want your brain to actually get better, not just hold steady, it needs something else entirely. It needs a workout. The protection story and the growth story are not the same story. Both of them matter, but they need to be aimed at the brain in different ways. This is where most people trip over the same mistake. They figure, I walk around, I talk to people, I cook, I run the household. Surely my brain is getting plenty of exercise. Here's the problem. Anything you do out of habit, your brain runs on autopilot. Your brain wired those tasks a long time ago. It is not building anything new. It is just replaying a program it already knows by heart. Picture a driver who has taken the same route to work for 15 years. They don't think about it anymore. They don't look for new roads. They just drive. That is your brain doing the dishes, folding the laundry, walking the dog along the same sidewalk for the 1,000th time. There's a pattern that comes up in primary care more often than people realize. Someone like Linda in her early 60s, sharp as ever, stays busy all day with errands, cooking, helping out with the grandkids, and she is genuinely convinced she is keeping her mind active. But every one of those activities is something her brain has done 10,000 times already. None of it is asking her brain to build a single new connection. Busy is not the same as challenged, and that distinction turns out to matter a great deal. There is something quietly hopeful in this idea, though. Linda is doing almost everything right. She is social, she is active, she is engaged with her family. The only thing missing is the kind of friction that drives the brain to lay down new wiring. That friction is uncomfortable in the moment. It feels like fumbling, like stumbling, like getting it wrong. But it is exactly the friction the brain uses to grow. For your brain to actually start building new connections, you have to hand it problems it hasn't solved before. Ideally, things that feel a little awkward, that force several systems to coordinate at the same time. That is exactly what these exercises do, and it is exactly why they work. The exercises in this video were selected because they share a single quality. They all force your brain to interrupt the autopilot and pay attention to what its own hands are doing. That single requirement is enough to wake up parts of the brain that a normal afternoon never touches. A few ground rules before we start. Each exercise gets at least 10 repetitions, and somewhere between 10 and 20 is the sweet spot. Go slow at first. The speed comes on its own as your brain learns the movement. That moment when you are learning a new movement pattern, a new sequence your hands haven't done before, that is when the new connections are actually forming. Once a movement becomes easy and automatic, your brain stops working at it. So the second something starts to feel smooth, make it a little harder. Speed it up, or read something out loud while you do it. That keeps your brain on its toes. Try to find a quiet corner of the house for these. A kitchen table works perfectly fine. The goal isn't a special room or perfect silence. The goal is just a few minutes where you are not multitasking. The exercises reward your attention. The more of it you can give them at first, the faster you will notice results. The first one is just a warm-up. Touch your index finger and thumb together to make a ring. Then slowly slide that ring up and down along your other fingers. Start slow, then pick up the pace. It looks almost too simple to matter, but it gets both halves of your brain firing at the same time. Aim for 10 to 20. The reason it is listed first is that it does something the others do not. It loosens up the small coordination circuits in your hands and primes them for the more involved exercises that come next. Second exercise, call it fist and palm. One hand lies flat, palm down on the table or your knee. The other hand is in a fist, standing straight up on top of it. Now switch them at the same time. The flat hand becomes the fist becomes flat. Slow at first, then a little faster. Watch for clean switches, because getting the positions exactly right matters more here than going fast. At least 10, 20 if you can. The reason this one works is that both hands are doing completely different things, so neither side can steal from the other. Your brain has to run two programs at once and keep them straight. Third one, nose and ear. One hand grabs the tip of your nose, the other reaches across and grabs the opposite ear. Then you clap and switch. Opposite hand to your nose, the other hand to the other ear. It looks like a kid's game, and honestly, it is one, but there's real brain science underneath it. To pull it off, your brain has to hold your hand's current position in working memory while it is already setting up the next move. Cognitive neuroscience research has shown that switching between tasks like this lights up the prefrontal cortex, the region at the front of your brain that handles working memory and planning. That region happens to be one of the first to take a hit when dementia sets in, which is exactly why this exercise earns its place. Aim for 10 reps. What's especially interesting about this one is how it feels at the beginning. The first few reps almost always feel clean, and the next few feel impossible. The brain has to switch frames every single time, and a frame switch is genuinely expensive neurologically. That is exactly the cost we want. Fourth, tap and rub. One hand pats the top of your head, the other rubs your belly in slow circles. Once you've got it, switch the hands. Clinicians who work in neurological rehabilitation lean on tasks a lot like this one. And here's the interesting part. That frustrating moment when two different movements just refuse to cooperate is the exact moment your brain is building new connections the hardest. So the struggle isn't a sign you're failing. It is the whole point. 10 on each side. Don't worry if it takes you a week to do this one smoothly. The first time the two motions suddenly cooperate on their own, without you thinking about it, you will feel a small jolt of satisfaction. That is your brain recording a small victory and filing it away. Fifth exercise, goat and cow, and stay with me on the names. One hand makes a goat, index finger and pinky pointing out, the middle two fingers tucked down. The other hand makes a cow, thumb and pinky out, the rest tucked in. Now switch both at once. Slow first, then faster. And if you can talk out loud while you are doing it, count, or just name things around the room, that is the ideal load, because now your brain is running in several gears at the same time. 20 reps. This one is the exercise most people underestimate. It looks silly from the outside, which is part of why it works. The silliness is exactly the kind of awkward, unfamiliar signal the brain needs in order to stop resting on its old programming. Sixth, salute and thumb. One hand goes up to your temple like a military salute. The other hand makes a thumbs up pointing forward. Switch both together. 1, 2. 1, 2. Slow, then faster. 10 to 20. Like the fist and palm exercise, this one is asking each half of your body to commit to its own task independently. The split focus is what trains the brain, not the speed itself. And the seventh is the hardest one, which also makes it the most effective. Take your thumb and touch it to each finger in turn. Pinky, ring, middle, index, then run it back the other way. Do it on one hand first. It should feel like a little wave rolling up and down your fingers. Then try both hands at the same time. Brain imaging studies have shown that this one exercise switches on more areas of your brain at once than almost anything else. The motor cortex that controls movement, the sensory cortex that handles touch, the cerebellum that fine-tunes your coordination, and the planning regions that line up a sequence of actions in the right order. Start slow, 10 on each hand, then bring them together. The first time most people try both hands at once, the timing unravels immediately. One hand is on the index finger, while the other is still on the pinky. That is normal. Trying to do this one perfectly is less important than trying to do it repeatedly. Each failed run still registers. Here's what tends to happen when people stick with it. There's a well-documented arc to this kind of cognitive work. Someone like Carol picks up these exercises, fumbles badly the first week, feels a little silly doing them at the kitchen table, and almost quits. She doesn't. By the third week, the goat and cow switch that tied her hands in knots is starting to flow. That is not a trick. That is her brain doing the exact thing we have been talking about, building wiring that wasn't there before. What changed for Carol wasn't just her fingers. She started noticing she could hold a thought for a beat longer when someone was talking to her. She stopped losing her place in the middle of a recipe. Those weren't dramatic improvements. They were quiet little upgrades, the kind that don't make headlines. And add them up over weeks, and they matter. Worth knowing as well, because it leads me to a question for you. The later in life you start working with exercises like these, the lower your starting cognitive reserve tends to be. Cognitive reserve is basically your brain's safety margin, the buffer that protects you from dementia, even when some of those changes are already quietly underway. After the age of 50, that buffer starts thinning out noticeably faster than it did when you were younger. The encouraging thing is that cognitive reserve is not fixed at birth. It grows when you do things like these exercises. It also grows when you learn a new language, pick up a musical instrument later in life, take a different route to work on purpose, or sit down with a puzzle where you genuinely don't know the answer yet. The important detail is novelty. Whatever it is, your brain has to be unsure of it for it to count. So tell me in the comments, how old are you? I ask because it genuinely shapes how I approach these topics, and knowing the age range of who's watching helps me make these videos more useful for you specifically. So let's bring it home. Alzheimer's and dementia don't arrive out of nowhere. They build over years, which means you have years to push back against them. Your brain builds new connections when you give it unfamiliar problems to solve, and the 7 exercises you just learned are exactly that kind of problem. 15 minutes a few times a week. That is the whole ask. That is genuinely a small investment relative to how much your brain is being asked to do for you every minute of every day. You don't need to carve out an hour, you don't need a membership, and you don't need to drive anywhere. Just a kitchen table, 15 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week. Give it a couple of months and a lot of people start noticing real shifts. Their thinking switches gears faster. Their focus holds longer. Their hands stop tripping over each other the way they used to. Is this worth bringing up with a neurologist or your regular doctor? Absolutely, especially if memory slips, ongoing tiredness, or trouble concentrating are already on your radar. It might be the nudge you need to take a real look at your sleep, your stress, and whether inflammation is running high in your body. There is also a small but real benefit to doing these exercises with someone else, a partner, a friend, a grandchild sitting on the carpet next to you. The laughter helps, the missed reps help, the conversations that come up while you are fumbling through them help even more. Anything that puts these into a room with another person tends to turn them from an obligation into a habit. One last thing, because it matters. Everything I share here is meant to give you something to think about and good questions to bring to your own doctor. It's never a stand-in for advice built around your specific health. If this gave you something useful, leave a like and subscribe. That is how the channel keeps growing. 300,000 subscribers is the target we are heading toward together, and every single one of you watching right now is the reason we get there.